Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating text from 2005. It's by an author named Xu Feng, and it's titled Gratitude, the First Element of Life's Sublimation. Now, what makes this specific source material so wildly compelling is that it completely flips how we usually think about gratitude. It doesn't just treat saying thank you as a nice social grace or, a healthy psychological habit. Instead, it outlines this highly intricate spiritual cosmology where gratitude is a literal, mechanical engine for human evolution. It's this wild blend of metaphysical concepts mixed with very grounded everyday actions. So let's dive right in and discover exactly how it builds this unique worldview. To start things off, just ask yourself, what if gratitude actually changed your physical makeup? I mean, the text we're looking at today goes even a step further than just the physical. But this is the core premise we really need to hold on to. The source argues that gratitude isn't merely good manners. It's a practice that alters the very structure of your being. It posits that every single time you feel and express genuine thanks, you are undergoing a literal structural transformation. All right, let's get into section 1, the structure of life. So the text introduces a highly specific definition for the word life. According to the author, life is a non-material structure. You can kind of think of it like a personal spiritual blueprint that you just carry around with you everywhere you go. And this structure, the text argues, exists on a spectrum. On one end, it can be deformed and unbalanced, but on the exact opposite end, it can be perfectly symmetrical. This is the totally impartial framework we're going to use to understand the rest of the author's philosophy. You are essentially carrying around this invisible architectural structure, and it is constantly being shaped by your actions and your attitudes. The text goes on to state that a symmetrical and perfect life is fundamentally beautiful and naturally belongs in a higher space of existence. But a deformed or unbalanced life, which the author actually directly links to a lack of gratitude, causes literal problems. And the source uses a really striking analogy here. It claims that when we're around ungrateful people, the discomfort or even the disgust we feel isn't just some manufactured social reaction. Actually, it's an instinctive rejection, a lot like a physical allergic reaction to a harmful substance. Our perfect structures are literally inherently repelled by the deformed structures of the ungrateful. Moving right along to section 2, sublimation to higher spaces. To really explain this, the author uses a super vivid scientific metaphor. Just as the Earth's atmosphere is divided into layers, from the troposphere where we live all the way up to the exosphere, the text argues that the universe has different spatial levels for different life structures. Animals, because they have less perfect structures, exist at the base level. But humans who achieve perfection become what the text calls celestial beings and ascend to higher spaces, like the thousand-year world. It's a literal stratification of existence, entirely based on how refined your inner structure is. And that brings us to the titler concept of the text, sublimation. The author defines sublimation as the precise process of transiting one's life, non-material structure, right into that state of perfection. Basically, it's the required mechanism to move up through those atmospheric layers of existence we just talked about. But of course, this leads us to the big, crucial question, what exactly is the fuel for this sublimation?
Well, that takes us to part 3, the 8 targets of gratitude.
Now, the way the author chunks the divine and familial targets we must thank is absolutely fascinating. First up, the text requires gratitude to the greatest creator for the physical world. We're talking the starry skies, the air, the water, and human affection. Second, we have to thank the major spiritual figures. The text specifically names Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, and Lao Tse, thanking them for their wisdom, atonement, and for essentially maintaining human dignity. And third, placed right alongside the divine, are our parents. We must thank them for the sheer, tremendous effort of raising us. I actually just want to pause for a second on this one specific quote from the text regarding parents, because the imagery the source uses is just incredible. The author describes parental love as being so heavy that even a green mountain cannot carry it, and even time and space cannot extinguish it. It's his beautifully poetic, almost overwhelming description of familial duty, highlighting the deep, foundational debt of gratitude the text argues we inherently owe to those who gave us life. Let's quickly run through the remaining targets to complete the author's full framework here. The text instructs us to thank our children for the joy they bring. Then, friends and relatives for their support during hard times. Teachers are thanked for their hard cultivation. In fact, the text explicitly uses the phrase, "you see because you stand on their shoulders." We also have to thank people with high ideals who offer emergency help. And finally, colleagues, classmates, and even total strangers for their sincere cooperation. So it's a complete ecosystem of thankfulness.
It reminds us that every single interaction in our daily lives, whether it's a helpful teacher or just a stranger you pass on the street, is an opportunity for this spiritual practice.
Which brings us to Section 4, the cost of ingratitude. So, what happens if you refuse to engage in this practice? Well, the text lays out some very grim and specific consequences for those who lack gratitude. The author argues that the ungrateful have no love in their hearts. They never repent, and they are fundamentally short of humanity. Because their life structures remain deformed, they fall into what the text rather dramatically calls the evil wallows of power, money, and fame. And most importantly, within this entire framework, they will never attain the chance to ascend. They remain permanently trapped in the lower animal levels of existence, completely unable to sublimate.
Finally, let's look at Section 5, Achieving Celestial Perfection.
The author's central promise to the reader is quite incredible. Daily gratitude is the literal engine that evolves your non-material structure. The text argues that by actively giving thanks every single day across those 8 targets we discussed, you aren't just becoming a kinder person. You are achieving the objective quality of a celestial being. You're getting yourself ready to transition into those much higher atmospheric layers of the universe.
To wrap things up, I want to leave you with the author's surprisingly sharp, provocative final thought from this 2005 text. Because after outlining this massive, grand, cosmic architecture of spiritual ascension, the author brings it right back down to earth with a very stark comparison. Even dogs know how to wag their tails to give thanks. Are we not as good as dogs? It's a blunt, incredibly memorable challenge. It forces us all to ponder. If this simple act of appreciation is instinctive even in the animal kingdom, what excuse do we possibly have to ignore the engine of our own evolution? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope it leaves you with something fascinating to chew on today.